and the Karl-Hermann-Stiftung, Germany. My name is Bipin Gimire. I work here as a regional political analyst at FNF South Asia. India today stands as the largest democracy and a symbol of emerging leadership in the global stage. With its rich civilizational heritage and one of the fastest growing economies, India is uniquely positioned to shape the 21st century. Its commitment to democratic values, pluralism, continues to inspire many developing countries in the global south. On the international stage, India has emerged as a credible and influential voice of the global south. This webinar aims to highlight and discuss India's rise as a democratic and economic powerhouse and a bridge builder in the global affairs. The webinar aims to inform the European audience about the evolving dynamics of Indian society, its expanding role on the international stage, and its significance as a key player in the international multipolar world. I'm excited about the valuable insights that our speakers will share today and look forward to the fruitful discussion. To set the tone for the discussion, we have requested former member of the German Bundestag, Honorable Sandra Wisser, for a brief keynote message, and she is very kind to provide us with a brief video message. We would like to play the video message now.
We are on a study trip right now together with the Friedrich-Naumann-Foundation South Asia, and we are in the countries such as Maldives, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and we will end up in India, is first of all that freedom is not granted and democracy neither. Democracy is really a big point which has to be, let's say, defended, and you have to fight for all the time. And even if you think that a political situation is kind of stable, it can be unstable maybe next week. And so therefore all the points which are important for democracy, parted powers and so on, has to be really, really defended, and you have every time to get up and fight for. India, of course, is a very, very important partner for Germany. We have the same targets. We want to strengthen our relationship. I have the impression the Indians, they are step in front of the Germans concerning digitalization. They are hungry. They really want to do something on the economic sector, and therefore it could be a very good opportunity that Germany gets closer to them concerning the business developments, but also, let's say, maybe we can strengthen the cultural exchange, getting people also from India to Germany to help us to go on in digitalization.
Thank you. Thank you. On behalf of the foundation, we would really like to thank you, Honorable Sandra Wisser. It was a very short but a very critical message about democracy, about the economy, and about the German-India partnership. We are very thankful for her for this message. For this webinar, without further ado, let me introduce the moderator of today's session, Mr. Ghanshyam Tiwari. He is a national spokesperson for Samajwadi Party and an alumnus of the Harvard Kennedy School and the IIM Bangalore. In a professional career over 2 decades, Mr. Tiwari has advised chief ministers and parliamentarians, mentored startups, and served different organizations such as London School of Economics and Gates Foundation. Mr. Tiwari also ran for a member of parliament in Bihar in national election in 2019. We are delighted, Mr. Tiwari, that you are here and you agreed to moderate today's webinar. With this, I'd like to hand over the session to you for the further discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Bipin, and I must thank everybody at Friedrich-Naumann-Foundation and the partners of this discussion for organizing a conversation on this important topic. I also would like to use an opportunity to welcome the esteemed panelists to this discussion. We are fortunate to be joined by Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, who has been an architect in the past decade of an important pillar of Indian democracy, which is our electoral system. India, with a population of 1.4 billion people, also has a billion voters. And Dr. S.Y. Qureshi has played an instrumental role in shaping the electoral process by which the voters can elect their leaders at a federal level as well as at the state level. As his introduction, Dr. S.Y. Qureshi served as the 17th Chief Election Commissioner from July 2010, with a diverse background, including roles as Secretary of Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, and Special Secretary Health and Director General of National AIDS Control Organization. He has been instrumental in pioneering initiatives such as India's largest AIDS awareness program, University Stock AIDS. Mr. Qureshi is also a prolific author, have contributed extensively to literature on democracy, elections, family planning, and social welfare. He and I have exchanged conversations on several national platforms, on day-to-day debates on national issues. We are also joined by Janvi Tripathi. Janvi is Associate Fellow, Observer Research Foundation. Janvi is focused on, at ORF, she's focused on the geoeconomics program. She served as the coordinator for the Think 20 India Secretariat during the G20 presidency in 2023 for India. She currently serves on the International Advisory Board Secretariat of Think 20 Brazil. Janvi's research includes international trade policy, including new trade issues like digital trade policy and gender and trade issues, besides the WTO reform and other matters related to trade. Prior to this, she was an associate researcher on international trade policy for the Confederation of Indian Industry, where she worked on a day-to-day basis with the government to advise the government on India's FTA negotiations with the EU and the RCEP alongside WTO policy positions. And our third panelist today is Mr. Apurv Kumar Mishra. Apurv is a consultant to the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Apurv has in his career taken several important roles with respect to the economic issues. From February to June 2022, he was policy leader fellow at European University Institute in Florence in Italy. He previously worked as a senior research fellow at India Foundation, a premier think tank in India, where he led initiatives related to India's foreign policy. He was also an adjunct faculty of law at Ashoka University and taught courses at law at several universities, including Gandhinagar National Law University, and so on. So without further ado, and Apurv is also editor-in-chief of Indian Law Journal. So between the panelists, we have an esteemed set who cover the electoral, who in their career have covered the administration of policies in India, the electoral system in India, the economic and trade affairs in India with respect to advisory to the government, and also have a good understanding of the law and various other matters that relate to India. I think I would like to use the opportunity to invite Dr. Qureshi to start the conversation. And the first point that would allow us to anchor this conversation to the current times is to hear his views, especially in context of his own work, as to where does India stand in the current world order with respect to democratic values, with respect to the conversation that is happening across the world, across the countries, and how does India's standing in this world order make it important for the Indian and European dialogue, as well as taking initiatives to strengthen the democratic values across the world, the values of diversity across the world. Over to you, Dr. Qureshi.
Thank you, Gansha. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so delighted to be here on this panel and to be speaking on India's role in global democracy. India's identity is democracy. India, from day one after independence, it chose democracy and democratic constitution. Second important thing is to know is that India is the largest democracy in the world, largest by miles, not just one of the largest, but largest, because the second largest is US. Nearly 1 billion voters. It is like more voters than every continent, more voters than 50 countries of Europe or 54 of Africa and so on. Actually, it is 90 countries rolled into one. The fact that we are able to conduct these elections in the last 75 years with clockwork precision, without failing, without delaying it even by a day, that is first sign of a stable democracy. Secondly, our elections have always been credible. Results have never been questioned or challenged, and maybe individual results could be challenged by the person who has competed with you, the co-contestant, through the election petition. But no questions ever been raised about the results and now the credibility of the election. As a result, the transition of power has been extremely smooth, which you can't imagine even in the USA today. You saw what happened 4 years ago and what has been happening now. But in India, never has the result been contested, and that's why the changeover of power from one party to the other has always been smooth. So while the second important thing, while we have the size and you say, what can you do? You have the number, you are a big country. But our emphasis even on to the last voter, one voter. We have several booths with only one or two voters. And till recently, there was a booth in Gir Forest of Gujarat where there was only one voter, but a polling party of 6 used to go the previous night, set up the polling booth, wait for him the whole day, whatever time he chooses, he comes and votes. And even after he had voted, we cannot pack up and go because somebody can come and challenge that the guy who came in the morning was a bogus voter, fake voter, I'm the real voter. So we have to decide that dispute also. Unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago. But then we have a similar booth in Arunachal Pradesh. We have some booth with 2, 3 voters. Then we have a booth which is 1400 kilometers from India's mainland and only 145 kilometers from Indonesia in South Nicobar called Indira Point, where we have about 245 voters. And there also we give you the same quality of election as in India's capital, New Delhi. So, while we have the numbers, but the focus on the single voter, and it is not only for effect that we emphasize the single voter or we provide for single voter. Actually, I've documented in my book, which I strongly suggest that at some point you may like to see, which is called an undocumented wonder, the making of the great Indian election, in which I have narrated the story from Rajasthan, where a Congress leader who was president of the Congress party, and if he had won, he would have been the chief minister. He lost by one vote. And interestingly, when he lost, we heard, and I cross-checked with him, that his wife had not voted. So I called him up and asked him, is that true that your wife had not voted? He said, yes, true. What happened was that on the day of election, his wife and daughter went to a temple which was a little far and they couldn't come back. So for us, there are 3 lessons here that number 1, every vote counts. Second, you can't take even your family for granted. Third, on the day of the poll, the most important temple is the polling station. Now, that's one lesson which our politicians have learned. So, actually, there is so much about India's democracy. There are some, of course, some temporary aberrations currently, but they do not really affect the overall quality of our democracy. The fact that 1 billion voters, 15 million is our staff, and they have to deliver a zero error election. Zero error means zero error. 99.9% good election is a bad election for us because 0.1 will mean thousands of voters who are denied their voting right, not acceptable to us. So these are some of the stories of India's democracy, for which India is held as a beacon of democracy, beacon of light. So I think we should, all of us should make effort to strengthen it and ensure that it doesn't lose that status. In fact, from the largest democracy, we would like to become the greatest democracy. So whatever it takes to become the greatest, we should try and put in our efforts. Thank you, Ghanshyam.
Thank you so much, Dr. Qureshi. Just I'm paraphrasing what you said. India is a time-tested democracy at the greatest scale that humanity has ever seen. The numbers at whatever level we analyze are mind-boggling. For example, a billion voters. Every 5 years, this number grows by 7-8%. The number of postal ballots itself will run into tens of millions. The number of to be precise, as per the Election Commission, we had 4.2 million postal ballots. We had more than a million um, polling stations at which the election was conducted. And to imagine this happening in a country that has languages and cultures that differ every 100 kilometer, and being administered at a central level with a central institution without a two-party system. We have countless parties, countless candidates, and every election sets a new agenda for the country. This is important as for the audience who wants to know more about India, to look at India as not just a democratic experiment at the greatest scale in the world, but also to look at as experiment in diversity, the experiment in building a dialogue across communities, religions, cultures in society, and electing a system, creating a system that then performs economically, that then performs its social duties, and that then performs to the needs of technology as the world is evolving fast. So with this, I would want to go to Janvi. Janvi, given this backdrop of Indian democracy, um, what do you think gives India opportunity to be a reliable partner in the Indo-Pacific? Also, how does this kind of nation make itself a valuable contributor and collaborator in economic growth, the supply chain resilience, trade partnerships, and overall balance in the world when we try to build this collaboration with Europe, which itself is very diverse as well?
Thank you for the question, Ghanshyam. It's a hard act to follow, but I'll try my best. Speaking in terms of the value of democracy for the economy, it's important for us to understand that democratic institutions enable our economy. If we did not have robust democratic institutions, it would be very hard for the Indian economy to grow at the rate, pace, and scale that it has. While we did have a moment in history where the bureaucracy was blamed for being too vast and ballooning, we did course correct, and we have been on a path of reducing the amount of bureaucracy required in business. So that has worked in favor of India when it comes to its economic position, its economic collaborations. The other way that democracy enables our economy is enabling people to participate in the economy. When people are participating in politics, they are also able to eventually participate in economic activity, which is enabled by governments. Because we remain one of the countries with one of the largest public sectors. The public sector remains one of the largest employers in our country. Whether that be in manufacturing, whether that be in service sectors, whether that be in education, for instance. So we must keep in mind that we are a bit of an experiment when it comes to economics. We're not a pure capitalist economy. We're not a market economy, but we're also not a pure socialist economy or a communist economy. It is very much an experiment that is working for us in real time, and we must keep that in mind. Coming to the question on supply chain resilience, we have seen a lot of stress on supply chains in recent times, whether it be the pandemic, whether it be the US-China trade war, whether it be us being caught in the crosshairs of a conflict in Europe, which is currently unsolved. We must keep in mind that India-Europe relations are not contingent on these other extra relations around. One of the main problems of our partnership right now is actually evidenced by numbers. India's exports to the US is about 18% of all its exports. India's exports to the EU are 17%. I'm talking one country versus 27 countries. It doesn't logically math for us that we are selling about equal to 27 developed countries what we are selling to one developed country. So that is a vulnerability that has entered into our economy, where we are seeing a concentration in terms of exports to a specific market. And these are the kind of vulnerabilities we need to solve against, which will in fact be solved at the end of the day by our democratic institutions, because in democracies, leaders tend to listen to their experts, which would be their executive order. And when these experts are able to identify these gaps, is the only way we'll be able to fill these gaps. When it comes to investment, India has stood in good ground. We are, according to the Financial Times and the FDI markets, the second largest investment destination in the world for greenfield investments at about 39%. So, and we are the second largest consumers of AI, which is next gen in terms of policy, in terms of employment, in terms of growth sectors of the economy. And these have wide implications for our democratic institutions as well, where it creates vulnerabilities in our election systems, in our systems of information and misinformation, how that has to be handled. So it throws up new challenges, and India is uniquely placed, not just as the greatest creator of data, but also the greatest consumer of data, to be able to solve for these challenges in real time and serve as not just a test case, but a rule setter, and change from becoming a rule taker in the global economy. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Janvi. I think it's good to emphasize on the way you emphasize about the nature of trade balance or imbalance that exists between India and EU compared to India and US, and also to dehyphenate what is going around the world, which are conflicts of differing nature, where where various countries are sometimes pitted against one another and sometimes pitted in groups that contradict one another. So in this contrast, it's a good point to bring in Apurv, who is working with the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, who has seen this fairly disruptive situation emerge in the last 5 years from COVID, lockdowns, to the war in Europe, to the war in Israel, to the trade tariff, certain decisions that emerge, and to the ongoing negotiations that happen in this context, to the war in India with Pakistan as well. So in this context, Apurv, the key questions arise. One is that do you see in your work that the democratic system in India allows the nation, the leadership, to navigate these various disruptive matters as they come along? Two, do you also see that as these matters get navigated, they create precedents which is different from the way India has approached its foreign policy, the values that the foreign policy used to communicate compared to the current world order, which seems a little brittle? And finally, do you see some uh, green shoots about uh, how this will lead in the current world order, current set of conflicts that the world is experiencing? How does it lend itself to better possibilities of collaboration between India and EU?
Yeah. So thanks, Ghanshyam, for that question, and I'm delighted to be a part of this panel. So thank you, FNF, for this kind invitation. Let me start with what Dr. Qureshi spoke about, which is the power of India's example in promulgating democratic values around the world. Because I think if you look at India's track record, that's a great sort of insight into what the future lies ahead for India, its engagement with the West, and its role in promulgating democracy around the world. Uh, People often underestimate the role of India and India's choices after independence in universalizing what were perceived as Western values. So today we are a political democracy, we are a market economy, we are a plural society, and all of these are features which help us develop close relationship, which act as a glue when we talk to Europe, when we talk to the United States, and to other such large democracies. But at the time when we got our independence and we made the choice of being a republic and a democracy, this was not so obvious that democracy was a morally superior form of governance. And I think one big reason why large parts of the developing world, or the developed world, and geographies outside of the West began to believe that democracy is a superior form of governance, morally superior form of governance, is because one of the big post-colonial polities, which is India, made that conscious choice to become a democracy after independence. And that power of India's example then made it more easy and made it more palatable for other geographies who then got their independence from colonial rule to then choose the democratic path in the next successive decade. So I think the first thing to emphasize to students of Indian democracy is the often unacknowledged role of India in spreading democratic values around the especially in the post-colonial world. So and we didn't just sort of make that conscious choice. We sustained democracy against very heavy odds and in a very difficult operating environment. Dr. Qureshi gave you numbers about the size of India's democracy, but sometimes we often underappreciate the diversity of India's democracy. And my favorite example of explaining this diversity is just to look at India's currency note. Most denominations around the world, the currency is written in one language. The dollar is in English, the dirham is in Arabic. In India, the denomination is written in, I think, 15 different languages, each of which is spoken by tens of millions of people. And the language that I speak, Maithili, is not on that list because I think only about 15 million people speak it. So I think to remain a successful democracy against such odds and in such a difficult operating environment. I mean, I often tell my American friends that it's easier to be a democracy when you have oceans on two sides and Canada and Mexico as your neighbors. Look at the operating environment in which India has to govern the country democratically. So given the size of the country, given its extreme diversity, given the extremely difficult operating environment, I think there is a lot of power in India's example as a successful and a thriving democracy. The result that today there are more people living in non-Western democracies than in Western democracies. And India is a big champion when we talk about being the voice of the global South. I think this is the power of India example is a big factor in our being able to talk about some of these values and use these values in our dealings with foreign countries. The other point that I want to emphasize, just so that we can anchor our discussion, and before I come to your question about how this helps us in dealing with foreign countries, is that over time, unlike the trajectory in most other countries which became democratic soon after independence, in India, democratic values have not weakened but have deepened over time. Right. So if you look at voter turnouts, if you look at the number of women voters, women candidates, incumbency rates, and Dr. Qureshi's wonderful book captures all of these things, and I've read it with great fascination, and I strongly urge people to read his book. But again, no matter what marker you look at, over time, the democratic principles, democratic values have deepened in our country, and I think today there is a very strong consensus in the entire Indian polity that the surest way to improve the lives of Indian citizens is to double down on these democratic values, because it is this democratic system that has also been able to unlock extraordinary prosperity over the last 30-40 years. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in the periods that we've seen the greatest increase in India's prosperity, the greatest improvement in economic well-being of India's citizens since 1991, has also seen the highest rates of participation in India's elections by any market that you look at. Right. So I do think there's a very strong national consensus today that there's a close link between India's democratic system and its journey to be a developed country by 2047, when we celebrate 100 years of independence. I spoke about how these values act as a glue when we talk to our friendly countries, especially when we talk to countries in the West. The fact that we are a political democracy, we are a market economy, we are a plural society. let me give you one example. For example, you spoke about India's engagement with EU and how some of these common values help intuitively understand us better, each other better when we're negotiating with them. So, I mean, think about technology that Janvi spoke about, and the fact that one of the big transnational problems of governance is how do we regulate artificial intelligence? How do we regulate the increasingly huge amounts of data that our lives and our engagement with the internet is generating? There are two extreme views. There is a view that all of the data belongs to the state, which is probably, you see that in China. And there's another extreme view that all of the data belongs to the companies that run these platforms, which you probably see in United States. I think other countries somewhere sort of stand between these two extremes, where there are conversations happening on the right to privacy, about the role of individuals' sovereignty over his own data. And I think on some of those discussions around the right to privacy and who owns this data, you see a great alignment between India and EU. And this again is a function of the common values that we share. So I think these values that we celebrate plays a big role in our engagement, in our economic engagement, in our political engagement, and in our cultural engagement with friendly countries, especially in the West. Thanks, Ghanshyam. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Apurv. In our next segment, let's look at the often heard statement that with great power comes great responsibility, but in terms of democracy, with great power comes great accountability. There is great power in being a democracy that has 1 billion voters. There's great power in being a very diverse country. There's great power in being a country that is said to be the world's 3rd largest democracy. Different reports peg Indian economy to be over $7 trillion by 2030. Our exports will touch $1 billion soon. 800, sorry, our exports have already been at a high level. And as we look at the possibilities that this is creating for India, we also face a very brittle and a world order that has conflicted value system. The India-US relationship that went from being a very friendly relationship to currently a relationship of contest. The India-EU relationship that was emerging, that was rapidly developing. With Germany, with several other countries, the friendship and the value-based engagement was strengthening. But somewhere the war in Russia, the choices India had to make for its economic value also come in the way of that relationship. And then there is the India-China relationship that has remained a place of contest in the eyes of the world, but also a place of collaboration, as you would see the recent news about new dialogues being opened between India and China. With respect to the recent war with Pakistan, where India sees Pakistan as a sponsor and perpetrator of terror, there is a new attempt by various countries, especially the United States, to bracket India and Pakistan together. So there are these different conflicts that change the course of conversation that has been happening. At the same time, India is a very valuable example to the global South. Although I don't agree with the term, but the valuable example is how a poor country can very quickly enable a vast majority of poor to adopt digital technologies, to find ways to self-sustain themselves, to build a vast amount of gig workforce, to be able to sustain its democracy, to be able to see sustained growth in this institution. So I think in this context, my question to you, Dr. Qureshi, is as you interact as a champion of India's electoral system with various people across the world, both in the developed countries as well as the global South, right? What is the worldview that you see? How do people see India? How do various countries, how do those who in leadership, who you interact with in the global South see India? And how do those who talk to you from the developed world about the Indian democratic or electoral system see India? I would have a similar type of question to Janvi and Apurv, though with respect to the trade and the resilience of these trade partnerships that are coming up. Over to you, Dr. Qureshi. And Bipin had a question, so Bipin, please feel free to come in after this round.
Yeah, thank you, Ghanshyam. around the world, if people know India by one word, it is democracy. Because as I said, this is our identity. And of course, people know that it's a big country with a lot of population. So that is an identity. But at the same time, people know that this is one of the working democracies, credible democracies, because, and I'll give you one example. In Election Commission, we set up, I started in 2011, a training institute called India International Institute of Democracy and Election Management. Original intention of mine was to train my 15 million people, which I mentioned, because if you want zero error election, you have to give them great training, 100% good training. So when I was setting up this institute, some people suggested that with that kind of infrastructure, why don't we also extend this facility to other countries? We gladly accepted. In fact, the India International, the word international was added with that intention. I'm so happy to tell you that in 12 years, 143 countries of the world have sent their election managers to train from us. So our global leadership or in the election, we are planning to be wish guru or world leader, world teacher. But in democracy, we are established world teachers. The fact that 143 countries have sent their election managers, top managers, including their commission, they have come all in 12 years to learn from us. So what better certificate and that you need? And when we give this training, we make sure we are not just singing praises of India and we tell them how we do it. That's a small part of it. We customize those training programs for them. How to do better election in South Africa or in Ghana or in Malaysia. So that is, or in the entire SAARC region. So that is one point I would like to make. Secondly, somewhere one of the panelists had mentioned about South Asian and Global South that we are talking about. I did a research, and my book is coming next month on 15th of September, called the Democracy Hub, the struggle for power in South Asia. Do you know the two important features of the book, which I discovered to my pleasant surprise, that the 40% of the world democratic population lives only in 8 countries of SAARC. 40%, nearly half of 8 countries out of 203 countries of the world. So, but at the same time, we do not get the due attention that we deserve, the investment that is required of international organizations, of universities and academia who have South Asia division. Second thing which I discovered was, and I heard this protest and murmurs in London School of Economics, School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and other places, that when you talk of South Asia, we only talk of India. Now, India alone is not South Asia. India is one of the 8 countries of SAARC. We say the different matter that we are the biggest, we are the tallest, and in which position we have a great responsibility. But we cannot undermine the importance of democracy in the other 7 countries. And that is where we have to play the leadership role, which we are playing through the triple IDEM, which I mentioned. In fact, for the entire SAARC countries, we offer in a year the courses for 30 people each for 15 days, entirely funded by Government of India, and training given free by IIDM. So that is one way of hand-holding, passing on our experience to our neighbors so that their democracy works as efficiently, as smoothly as ours does. And by the way, if you just extend this argument a little further to rest of South Asia, 11 countries of ASEAN, then we more than 50% of democracy lives in this region. Therefore, when we talk of global South or global South should include Africa, mind you, Africa also. That is also in the South. But when we talk of global South, our focus is entirely on the South of Asia, which is all right, because that itself is so important that half of world's democracy lives here. So these are things which require attention and more focus of the academic world and the donors. They should come together and see what are the needs of the democracy. Can we train parliamentarians? Can we train election managers of those countries there? there are so many possibilities, but for that, the first thing is to have a debate on this. And I'm glad FNF has taken this initiative. I think this is the first step in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Qureshi. To paraphrase that the Indian election system has already become a platform for countries across the world to come and learn. And similarly, there are other well-developed systems. Uh, the fact that a billion people can elect a government, change their governments at a federal level and then at state level, the fact that a billion people are also becoming digital first means that there are a number of systems at low cost, high scale that are working with resilience. And this is something that much of the global south needs. And it does lend to an opportunity that if the developed countries want to co-lead this process of development, then India becomes a very important platform for humanity to participate, and rather than build from scratch, to look at examples that India have accomplished at low cost, high scale, high resilience, and enable deployment of these examples. So with that, over to you, Janvi, about this brittle world order that we see, where there is an intermix of past value system on which the nations used to engage with one another, and new model of opportunism or local realities that have come into play, or regional realities that have come into play. What is the worldview that you come across with about India, and how is it impacting the trade, the resilience of supply chain, and the pathway that exists going ahead in adoption of new technologies that will shape the world?
Thank you for the question. And when Dr. Qureshi was talking about protests at the LSE as an alum, I was thinking back to my days and can concur that that is in fact something that does often occur in the study space in the UK, where India tends to be so overwhelmingly vibrant and big in conversations that we don't pay enough attention to the region. Which brings me to your question, Ghansham, on how regional collaborations and regional groupings are starting to shape how we view our international trade. Because we have come to see that traditional partners are, in fact, opportunistic partners. They are looking at that next deal. They are looking at that limited profit that they can turn. And there's a very narrow-minded understanding of how international trade is functioning in the old Western guard of economics. So when we talk about, reducing trade relationships to deficits, when in fact there is the complexity of investment returns that, say, for instance, American MNCs or European MNCs are getting out of the Indian market by investing in the Indian market. At the end of the day, the profit from an Apple cell phone that is made in India is made by Apple company, which is based in the US. So that nuance that is lost in the more opportunistic understanding of economics today, that needs to be addressed, and that can be addressed, for instance, by paying more attention to our regional partners when it comes to trade. Because while there is a comparative advantage, limited comparative advantage that some of our regional so-called rivals are getting in terms of tariffs from one of the largest markets, at the end of the day, India is still able to compete in terms of quality and scale. We still have that capacity. The idea is to shift the market focus. So it is not that, for instance, very interestingly, a Russian interlocutor this morning at a seminar was saying that if the US does not want to buy Indian products, sell it to Russia, we will buy it. And that is essentially at essence, the point that we must understand as a country, that we need to be agile in terms of markets instead of spending time understanding intent. The intent behind actions of other countries, it doesn't matter in the longer run, because at the end of the day, that action is being taken. Our job is to be able to respond to those actions and be agile enough that our companies, our SMEs are not impacted to the extent that they will be if we don't diversify our markets and if we don't access newer markets. There was an interesting point you had raised 2 questions ago on being a poor country and coming out of poverty and the role of digital technologies in that. It is also tied to our manufacturing journey, which has, developed over the past decade, where you see multidimensional poverty coming down from about 30%. So it was at 29 point something percent, and it has come down to 11%. And this is a large difference for over a decade. And it is something we should be able to pat ourselves on the back for. What we do have to realize is that new technologies require new skills. And the rate at which we are reskilling our workforce is very important when it comes to building resilience into our own economy. So while we may be pursuing trade agreements with other partners, which is a very important part of foreign trade policy, our internal domestic economy is very much dependent on how skilled our workforce is, because it doesn't take too long for a demographic dividend to become a demographic burden. And that is the trap that we must avoid, because it's great that we have a young workforce. We need a skilled workforce. There is a very, very vast difference between the two. And that is something we need to be aware of as we continue down our journey towards being a developed economy and not just a developing economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Janvi. I think you did propose a unique competitive model on how India can dehyphenate its position with the vis-a-vis different parts of the world. So coming to you, Apurv. Given what is happening in the world and given how India is getting ranked on various global indices with respect to press freedom, with respect to gender equality, with respect to inequality in India itself, these don't paint a progressive picture of how India is evolving, at least in terms of these indices. On the other hand, if one looks at the digital freedom, if there's one such thing, the ability of a poorest of the poor person to use all kinds of digital tools to upgrade the quality of their lives, I think India would rank very, very high compared to any other country with respect to financial transactions that the poor can do, with respect to the way they can go about their own election process, knowing about a candidate, about a party, the issues, participating in that conversation. So there's a crossroad here. And when we deal with countries like Russia, the current model of United States leadership, deal with countries like China, Pakistan, there are the benefits of the democratic system are not the ones that get highlighted there. These countries demand a showcase of strong leadership. At the same time, when we deal with our partners in Europe, the way the world knows us, they know us as the nation that is the largest experiment of working democracy for the world with diversity there. So in this situation, as you advise the Prime Minister Economic Advisory Council, how do you do the trade-offs? Do you look at conversations that talk about, no, we must preserve our democratic values and continue to work on our ways such that these indices that don't show a progression in Indian democratic system can be reversed, or do you see a conversation that, look, the world is right now in a mixed bag. There are countries that are doing economically well, which are not democracies, and they are on the negotiating table, and there are countries that are doing well, that are democracies. So we don't have to go overboard. We have to sustain in this chaos in the way we are going. Do you see any trade-off being discussed with respect to democratic values versus trade priorities?
Yeah, so that's a very, very interesting and a very difficult question, if I may add, Ghanshyam. I don't want to comment specifically on any of these surveys. I think our team at EPM has surveys and tried and part of this
I think there's some problem with your audio, or maybe I
these
am.
international service. Make a last point that is it better now?
Um,
Can you hear me
yeah,
now? Is it better?
there is a there's some problem with your audio. I think try again, and if the problem persists, then we can take that question to Dr. Qureshi and Janvi while your
Just
audio.
yeah, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me, Gansha? Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So what I was saying is that while I don't want to specifically comment on any of these surveys that are based on perceptions, and we at the EAC we've done a lot of analysis of these surveys and we've put up our response on our website, which I would encourage viewers to check out. I do want to make a larger point that if we believe that democracy is a morally superior form of governance because it enables human flourishing, I think the simplest data point to look at is how successful has our democratic framework been in improving the lives of citizens, in elevating poverty. And on that, I think the consensus is unanimous. This is not our data, the government's data. This is the UN data that in the last 15 years, we've lifted 415 million people out of poverty, and that has tremendous implications for well-being of the world's largest democracy. The other questions that you raise around the tension that we are seeing, the contrast between our digital prowess versus how we are dealing with other countries. I do think that a lot of the turbulence that we are seeing in our world today is a symptom of a larger structural change that's happening uh, in, in the world order. What we are seeing is what Dr. Jekyll likes to call a rebalancing world. This started with an economic rebalancing where we occupy a larger share of the global GDP. That economic balancing is now leading to a political and a cultural rebalancing. So political rebalancing in terms of the connections of the developed world with the developing world and between developing world countries is proliferating. And the best example of this is how the G7 became the 20, and G20 then became one of the most vibrant organizations in international governance. And so therefore I think in a world which is becoming less Western, more Asian, more multipolar, there will be a cultural rebalancing also. And I think a lot of the debates that you will see about the nature of democracy in India is part of this discussion around what does it mean to be a successful democracy. And like I said, today democracy is not just a Western idea. I mean, today more people live in non-Western democracies than Western democracies. Right? So I do think that in a rebalancing world, in a more multipolar world, India's rise as India's economic rise as a non-Western democracy will have global implications. It will, of course, increase our capabilities. It will also increase our ambitions. But we will also be very sensitive to any internal or external factor that jeopardizes our journey to be a developed country by 2047. Whether it is on some of our security issues, whether on some of our trade negotiations, we've always emphasized that we will prioritize our national interest and the well-being of our 1.4 billion people, because that is what democracies do. You respond to the needs of the public that you serve. I do, however, I must confess, we've been following trade negotiations with EU for a long time. Today, more than at any other point in time, you do see a greater sympathetic understanding from our EU partners on the sensitivities that I just spoke about. And I think I'm very hopeful of our two sides being able to reach a free trade agreement by the end of the year, as was directed by the Miss von der Leyen and Prime Minister Modi during her visit to India earlier this year. So, and again, that goes to the point that when there is political will in a democracy, when political leadership wants to to get something done in a democracy. I do think it is the value we share with EU, with the United States, acts as a glue in sort of overcoming any temporary roadblocks that come up because of a changing world, which is, like I said, that is undergoing structural changes. You are seeing a rebalancing world. You are seeing a more multipolar world. You are seeing greater salience for Asia, a less Western world, and that will lead to some of these challenges, temporary tactical challenges that all countries, not just India, are experiencing. But what helps you overcome these challenges is common values. If you and your partners share common values, if you have a common understanding, that helps you overcome these challenges. And you're seeing that with EU. I'm very sure you'll see that with the United States. And I'm very hopeful that eventually we will be able to leverage the fact that we are a political democracy, a market economy, and a plural society to overcome all of these challenges that you flagged.
Thank you, Apurv. So, as the final segment of this conversation, and then we'll open up to questions as well. Let's look into future. One aspect of the future is taking a cue from what Apurv said, that the indices that are out there with respect to press freedom, with respect to freedom of speech, gender equity, and many other things, they are indices of a Western democratic system. India is evolving its own system that a self-reliant India believes in. But these systems do determine the worldview that India has. But that worldview is also contrasted with the fact that there are different negotiators at the world stage, from the United States to China to EU, in the partnerships that India has. But so one aspect of where this everything is going to play together is the aspect of the rise of artificial intelligence, AI, and the way it will play into the role of play towards shaping the world order, towards shaping the global economy. For example, there are positives. One positive, this is for the audience, that India today has the largest number of children who are in school, by far the largest number. We also have the largest number of working working population that humanity has ever seen in a country. If AI is the super brain that is going to eventually become available to everybody, then India, as a country which has been able to enable digital adoption at the grassroots, at the bottommost level, is probably at scale most ready to adopt some of these technologies, or adopt this super brain at an individual level, at the level of individual student, youth, working professional, possibly systems, to superpower its success, its progress. That's one side of the story. The other side of the story is that it can lead to job losses. It requires a certain level of infrastructure, from GPUs to the AI infrastructure, etc. That is becoming more and more data centers, that is becoming more and more concentrated between United States and China. The regulations are currently in a chaotic place if you look at it globally. So my question to Dr. Qureshi in this respect is that whether it is from the point of view of India forming its own indices towards what the right level of diversity, freedoms, citizen empowerment, the government structure, etc., should be in a democracy which is not necessarily Western, to the rise of AI that remains concentrated among certain worlds. What is a positive picture that you see of India in this new world that is going to be in front of us? Also, India has had a stable national government for the last 11 years, but one aspect of democracy is the government's change. So from your experience as a key leader in the architecture of Indian democracy currently, do you see a different, do you see that the world will continue to engage with India the way it is engaging? Or if should there be a change in government in future, right, something else will evolve as a result of it? Can you, in summary, long question, in summary, between these various situations, what's your most positive outlook for India if you have to explain it to the world? We can't hear you. You are on mute.
Yeah, I was saying that political parties come and go, governments come and go, but the nation and the government as such as an institution continues. And India has a bright future because, as I mentioned to you earlier, India is 90 countries rolled into one. Suppose some Western country gets angry with India, "Oh, rule it out, let us do business with Sri Lanka." Where is Sri Lanka and where is India? Or Bhutan or Nepal or what? 90 countries into one. All of Europe is 60% of India. Therefore, no one can afford to ignore India. They have, whether they like it or not, they have to do business with us. And we also need to know our weaknesses. We have been talking of a skill. I was doing research for my another book on population myth, for which I have found that only 4.57% of Indians are formally skilled. 95% are not skilled, yet we have almost captured the world economically. And if you contrast it with Japan, China, UK, everyone, 40%, 50%, and South Korea, 96%. Whereas we have only less than 5% formally skilled, and we have captured the world. Imagine if 9%, just double it, and 10% of Indians get formal skill. Why not 20 and 30? We will be the rulers, and therefore we have a bright future without doubt. And what used to be, we were very ashamed of our population growth once upon a time. Population explosion, it will destroy our economy. They have become our human resource. They are the 25 of the top CEOs of the American companies, multinational, they're Indians. So we were able to produce. So therefore, our emphasis should be on better quality vocational education. That will take us far. Your other question, the first question, Ghanshyam, just if you could quite quickly remind me, what was that? The first part?
The first part was about the different approaches. One is the worldview on progress of Indian democracy with respect to indices that are there.
Yeah,
And second
indices.
is
Yeah, I got it now. The
point
other
that
thing,
we have to develop
uh,
our own indices.
yes, let me come to that because that's a very interesting question you raised about indices. There is an World Global Index of Democracy by The Economist. There is another index of democracy by VDEM. There are actually 12 or 13 indexes which have various indices on which they evaluate. And we are constantly for the last 25 years classified as a flawed democracy. When I was writing my book, Undocumented Wonder, at the end of my research, I came across this term that India is a flawed democracy. My instant reaction was of anger. Oh, this must be a Western conspiracy to show India down. But when I studied why India is being shown as a flawed democracy, exactly for the reasons which we are protesting about, talking about. Are we not in 25% of Indians, it is 300 million people are still illiterate? There are only 11% MPs in women MPs in parliament. Are we not concerned? There is criminalization of politics. Are we not concerned? These are exactly the factors which are keeping us low, keeping us down. And you all know that what is the independence of media in the country. There's nothing to be proud of at all. Now, and these indexes are very sensitive to changes. If we make some improvement in 1 year, suddenly our index improves and next year it goes down. Therefore, instead of condemning them, no, all that. In fact, our government, I read a report in Hindustan Times that they sent some people to Economist office. Hey, look, you're showing us a flawed democracy. What is your criteria? What is the mechanism? They say, damn it, we do it in the 203 countries of the world with the same yardstick, with the same parameters. We don't have special parameters for India. And then we offered, we will give you the data. So what are you talking about? We have a very scientific method which we follow across the globe. Therefore, instead of getting upset by our index going down or not going up, we should introspect. You will remember some years ago, the government of India decided that on ease of doing business, we were very low on the index. And Prime Minister himself took personal interest. Within 1 year, we jumped 40 positions. So introspection and then action is what we need if we really want to strengthen our democracy. But with all these flaws, the world has to take us seriously, and they do take us seriously, and we have a very positive and bright future.
Thank you, Dr. Qureshi. Over to you, Janvi. Given the picture of the future that is in front of us in the AI era and the concentration of current AI technologies and infrastructure in some countries, the possibility of a digital India or a digitally empowered Indian in vast numbers, uh, adopting to the AI era faster to gain more knowledge, to skill themselves better, and as a result, contribute better to the global progress. Right. In the middle of all this, what is the most positive outlook that you can share for India to the audience? Also, I'm including a question from Stavros about the success that some of our neighbors have had, where they are not as democratic, whether it is Singapore, China, and the other countries in the Middle East. So we are a flourishing democracy in this basket of other countries who have otherwise economically flourished, taken people out of poverty, right? So do democracy offer us some advantages?
Very loaded questions, all of them, Ganjam. I'm going to address a few of them in order. First, from a thought that occurred from what Apurv said regarding free trade agreements that India is signing. It is quite alarming that we've spent 23 years negotiating with the EU, but it took us 3 years to negotiate with the UK. It's not like we speak similar languages, right? At the end of the day, we are speaking in our colonial tongue at the moment. This is not our actual language. So it is a matter of how and what we prioritize when it comes to trade agreements. And this ties to your question on digitalization, because that is a unique factor in the past decade that has changed the game in trade negotiations. It is something that is impacting negotiation at the WTO as well. So when we talk about digital trade, when we talk about intellectual property, when we talk about innovation, India is very much at a place where we need to be investing more in innovation and R&D. It is very much at a place where it is inviting investment in these areas, and therefore it is very much at a place where it is good if we conclude that EU trade agreement. It's obviously not just an India problem. It is also the EU with its unique membership and its unique, what Portugal wants from an India deal is not what a Germany wants from an India deal, right? There are going to be differences because EU at the end of the day is a collection of very diverse countries, and this was proven in the 2008 crisis and over the 5 years that followed the 2008 economic crisis, where countries responded differently to the crisis. And different countries within the EU were impacted at a different level due to the crisis. It was also one of the reasons we had to pause our FTA negotiations. So we must keep these nuances in mind when we start talking about a digital, society. Now that we now have a digital society, where we need to acknowledge that not everyone has equal access to digital products, to digital services. However, ironically, India is one of the biggest employers of DPI, digital public infrastructure. And we were one of the first countries to start moving up on tech during COVID. The amount of UPI transactions that happen in India are a case in point. We're one of the most fintech savvy countries. So it's a matter of who has access to what resources and how accessible we are making them. And it comes back to language. Not everyone on the street is speaking English, right? We're speaking of the 90 countries that Dr. Qureshi mentioned. So that's that many languages. So not everyone is understanding the interface. So when a Samsung India comes up with a smartphone which is able to translate to various local languages, and that is able to be translated into app interfaces, it is very important for our digital growth, and therefore for the growth of our society, and therefore for the growth of our economy. The question on, more authoritarian, so to speak, countries developing better than India, I don't think it's a better form of development. It may be faster. It may be on paper better looking, but at the end of the day, do we want a command economy is the question. We have experimented with a command economy. India did not like a command economy because at the end of the day, we are too diverse to be able to have a command economy. In addition, let us remind ourselves that both Singapore and China identify as developing countries in the WTO alongside India. So it is not like they are up there in terms of addressing inequality because internal inequality is a great OECD problem. South Korea, in fact, is often seen as an example of a country where inequalities are so deeply entrenched and not addressed, while it is economically sound. So when we're trying to balance social welfare with economic growth, it is very much important that we have a democracy and not, say, a communist regime or an authoritarian regime. Because democracies enable us to think about the people and less about just simple economic growth.
Thank you, Janvi. Apurv, in the interest of time, you will have only 2 minutes to answer this for yourself, for us. Basically, what is the most positive outlook that you can present for India, given this frame that is ahead of us, which is AI infrastructure, as well as the state of Indian economy and the interactions we are having with the world?
So, Ghanshyam, when you talk to any policymaker today and you ask them what is keeping them occupied, they'll say three T's: terrorism, tariffs. But the one thing that at least gives me sleepless nights is technology. That is really our. Do we have world-beating capabilities in frontier
I
technology?
was going to
think
guess
if we
you
can
were
develop
going to
that.
I'm sorry to interject. I was going to guess you were going to say Trump, but good that you said technology.
Like I said, there are tactical problems and then there are structural issues. I think structural dynamics always help overcome tactical issues. But I think on technology, I think we if we have to secure democracy not just in India, but also in large parts of the global South, if we have to ensure that the new world order that emerges is stable, is equitable, more than the one that we are currently transitioning from. We have to ensure that India, as the world's largest democracy and as a well-wisher of the global South, has world-beating capabilities in frontier technologies. So we are doing that, for example, by building a semiconductor sort of ecosystem in the country, which I do know Germany is also doing, and that's again one of the areas where India and Germany and India EU can cooperate. Just a quick sort of digression, but I think one of the most interesting sort of forums that we have for cooperation with friendly countries is what India and EU have in form of their Trade and Technology Council. EU has Trade and Technology Council with just two countries, India and United States, and that tells you a little bit about how closely India and EU can and will cooperate on issues relating to technological services. So, semiconductors, intelligence, again, EU views side. Viewing artificial intelligence, the area where we have to work closely with the Europeans. But even in other areas like green technologies. Hello.
Yeah, I think your voice is cracking. Also, we have run out of time.
Yeah,
So
that's the point. I think we will be a developed country by 2047 if we can solve for three big issues: urbanization, skilling, something that we spoke about, and developing world-beating capabilities in frontier technologies. There is a great opportunity for the world and especially for our partner countries to participate in India's growth story. Today, a country which is a $5 trillion economy will go anywhere between 26 trillion to over $50 trillion worth of economy in the next 25 years. So there is an extraordinary amount of prosperity waiting to be unlocked in the country, and our friends and our partner countries must participate in this journey and the opportunity that the India growth story provides. So I think that's where I land.
thank you, Apurv. Thank you, Janvi. Thank you, Dr. Qureshi. for your views. There are a couple of questions from Sebastian. I'll just answer in one line, and then I would like to invite Dr. Kasim Klein uh, for concluding this conversation. But Sebastian, to your question about making the work that is happening to help legal entities be smooth for investors, there are two things that are happening in parallel. One is that the whole startup ecosystem in India is so vibrant that it keeps going and negotiating with the government to continuously improve the and reform the system for a smoother investment process. And second is that this is a key focus, not just at the federal level but also at the state level, because there's a lot of competition among states to attract investors, and as a result, the states who are better governed are going out of the way to compete with one another on this aspect. There could be a full discussion on this, but because we don't have time, I would not go there. With respect to skilled workforce, again, this is better seen at the state level, how states are trying to compete with one another to attract investors by showcasing their skilled workforce. There's a lot of promise in AI tools and solutions that are coming up. But again, it's a big discussion. India has around 600 million people in the workforce. So definitely AI, no AI, this is a work in progress for the country. The country has to go towards the goals it has set itself up for. With that, I would like to invite Dr. Kasim Klein, who's been a powerful thought leader in the India, EU, India, German dialogue, conversations, as well as various experiences that he has allowed people in India, leaders in India, journalists in India to have with respect to Germany as well as EU. Over to you, Dr. Kasim Klein. Thank you for this opportunity again.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. First of all, dear participants, dear Sandra Weser, especially Dr. Qureshi, Mr. Mishra, dear Mrs. Tripathi, and dear Mr. Tiwari, it was really, again, an excellent discussion on a very important topic, perhaps the most important topic. How could we preserve our democracies? How could we make them more stable? And also more people being aware of our democratic systems. This particular webinar also marks for myself, allow me to say that, the end of a certain journey, my journey here in India. I had been serving as South Asia director for our foundation for 5 years now. And yeah, I just could only say I had several times the opportunity in webinars, and better, Mr. Tiwari, in person, the possibility to interact with a lot of you. Fascinating personalities from all over South Asia. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I really think that this discussion has again clearly showed that India's journey reminds us that a stable democracy can not only uphold its own interests and own values, but also could serve as a bridge, could serve as a role model. India undoubtedly is a role model for many other democratic or semi-democratic systems. And I think that you could see very clearly how India advanced its democracy, how it fosters its different interest and strengthens the principles of cooperation and dialogue with many aims, but also with the aim of bridging global south to global north for the pursuit of a more inclusive and perhaps also a more equitable international order. And that is really something India could be proud of. And let me please add, I personally, after this journey here in India and South Asia, I have been very, very proud, and I'm still together with my team to be part, saying like that. It is social groups, it's multiple influences with impacts, with many, many very engaged people like you getting into discussions in order to improve every different phase, every different part of the democratic system. So thank you very much for that. And let me please just end that with my opportunity to participate in elections, the national elections and also state elections. And what I really found extremely remarkable was the personal resilience of the people in very, very different respects, and the bride of very, very many people showing, this ink, this voting ink, in order to make sure, listen, see, I have casted my vote, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I find this is really fascinating, a bride of democracy, which you find in many old democratic systems, perhaps not in this form anymore. So again, thank you very much to all of you. Thank you to our audience. Thank you especially to the panelists of all of our discussion rounds. As I said, it was also a steep learning curve for myself. And let me please again say, without our excellent networks, without you, the people there, without any our moderators, without the ideas also of the people in our team, Nupur, Mr. Bipin, Mr. Hoffman, of course, and Mrs. Bakshi, and many, many others, this would never have been possible. And then let me also add thanks a lot here to our dear friends and colleagues from our German office, in this case from the B department, the domestic department of foundation, and the team from Rhineland-Palatinate. And thank you, Mrs. Els, and thank you very much, Mr. Walz, for your personal contribution in order to make this seminar, this webinar possible. Again, thanks a lot to our panelists. Hope seeing you soon again in India, in Germany, in Europe, or in South Asia. Thank you very much for this very vivid discussion. It again showed very clearly how important it is to struggle every day for our democratic systems. Thanks a lot, and I wish you a very good afternoon. And if you would like to know a little bit more about Foundation's initiatives, do not hesitate to check on social media. Thanks a lot, and do have a great evening.